agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Admin communications, MSIP 6 update.
Thank you. As you are aware, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has made adjustments to MSIP 5 starting on July 1. We will be ushering in MSIP 6, and today I have a guest with us to go over some of the changes, but also to talk about how points will be awarded and calculated for APR purposes. So I am going to invite Matt Goodman up. He does data for us for Education Plus and the meetings that we have, and then also is at Pattonville School District. So I'm going to get the presentation ready and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Jameson, and thank you, Board of Directors, for having me in this evening. Glad to come visit with you about MSIP 6. If we haven't heard about it, I think we will start hearing more because it is here. The MSIP process is undertaken with the State Board approving a set of standards and indicators. That work happened in the winter of 2020. Actually, it was one of the last items before the pandemic hit. And at that point, the MSIP 6 clock started beginning. There's a 2-year window from the adoption of the standards and indicators to being and publishing the annual performance report, what we think of as the scores and the data with MSIP 6. So this year, the work has been around in the metrics and how that scoring will come to pass. So we pass a set of standards and indicators, then we say, okay, how are we going to measure them and how will they be scored? So that work has been undertaken by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education throughout this school year, started back in the fall and continues until now. It is not finalized. What I'll be sharing with you is draft at this point. There is a process that we will know when it is formally adopted. That should happen in May. And yet, because of some of the changes with assessment and some of the rules that were under there, we actually won't know our final targets until August or September. Now, we're taking assessments now. So that creates a little bit of a challenge for us to be able to project ahead as to where we might be. Fortunately, there is kind of a safe harbor provision coming out of the gate. This year is preliminary. No classifications can be lowered off of this year's. It's really kind of the baseline, but it is different. And so in visiting with Dr. Jameson, asked if I would be willing to share, and I said, sure, always willing to kind of spread the news. So next slide, please. A couple pieces to point out. There are some positive changes that we think we see with MSIP 5 to MSIP 6. Some of the key changes to point out and note that have come through is that first thing we can think about is how points come into the system. So in MSIP 5, our results were based on 100% of performance, what we received as outputs: student achievement, college career readiness, attendance, graduation rate. MSIP 6 is moving to what we're calling a 70-30 split. 70% of the points are coming through from performance measures, 30% in a new area coming in that they've termed continuous improvement. And that's a positive thing, we think, that gives districts a chance to share the work they're doing, highlight what that work is, report out and say how they're doing towards those goals, and points will come through on the accreditation side. So that's the first key change, and I'll say a little bit more about that. Second line you see there is on the achievement side of the MPI to continuous MPI. So this is kind of a technical piece that really matters to districts, but what it tries to do is to take the student achievement results that we get each year, and can we put them kind of into one number. So if you think about it, when we take state assessment, we have 4 levels of achievement: below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced. The MPI has a formula to roll that information together and then set targets off of it. They are shifting to a new form of MPI called continuous MPI that I'll give you the specifics on that. Third row there deals with free and reduced lunch status eligibility. As a function of the pandemic, there have been lower free and reduced lunch rates known in schools for the lack of paperwork, and also that we've had more districts and schools bring on what's called the community eligibility provision, which essentially allows all students to receive a free lunch in the school, but also that paperwork isn't filled out. So the data at the student level is a little bit harder now to obtain. So the state will be moving to a direct certification process on that to identify free and reduced lunch status. Attendance, previously, as I said, was in performance standards, is now moving to continuous improvement standards. Equity information, there was not an aspect around issues of equity in MSIP 5. There will be a specific report developed for purposes of reporting and understanding equity. High school assessment. Previously, there was a general requirement that before a student graduated, the required EOC should be taken. Beginning next school year, they're moving to an approach where the EOC is to be taken when course credit is received. And then finally, I already alluded to it a little bit, but continuous improvement. So we'll talk about what that process looks like. We did not have it in 5, but we will bring you in 6. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is a transitional year. Classification cannot be lowered due to performance. There are other mechanisms that the department can use to lower districts' classification status. And so that is in statute, and they can still do that, but it will not be based off of performance. Also, the achievement status measures, when we think about MSIP, it usually runs on 3 years' worth of data. However, this year from the student achievement side will just be the results we get this spring, because last year's results, it was determined that we would not be held accountable for those. It was test, and test as many students as we can given the situation. And the prior year, we didn't have state assessment at all. So we really are only running 1 year of student achievement in this upcoming APR, which makes it even harder to forecast and understand where we may be. Okay, next slide, please. Accreditation levels, this is always an important consideration. The points, the percent of points to determine an accreditation status are not changing as far as unaccredited and provisional. They're staying at 50% of points and 70% of points. But you will notice that accredited with distinction is coming back into the system. That had been there in previous iterations of MSIP prior to 5. It really had not been there with 5. They are bringing that back in, and that would be if an LEA earned 95% of points or higher. Next slide, please. So when we think about the points allocations, then we have this 70-30 split. If it's a pie, all of the pie before that dark purple on performance, now we're seeing 70% performance, 30% continuous improvement. Next slide, please. And those percentages break out with the standards. So the department approves, the state board, I should say, the department brings the standards and indicators to the state board approves them, then the department begins working on measurements. And so that's kind of then where these annotations come in of this 70-30 split there. The other change with MSIP 6 that may make it easier to think about is that with MSIP 5, we ran a 140-point system. In MSIP 6, it's going to be a 100-point system. So the percentages equal the points. 70%, 70 of our 100 points will come on the performance side are available, 30 on the continuous improvement side. Next slide, please. So, continuous MPI. As referenced, we receive achievement level data from students that test each year. Students will score below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced. The MPI was used to transition off of what we had with No Child Left Behind of percent top 2. That was just kind of the common way that NCLB was written, and we would be held accountable to those measures of percent proficient and advanced. The MPI worked to transition off of that and did so by providing multipliers or weights for each of the achievement levels. So it ran on a 1, 3, 4, 5 system, meaning what? We would take the number of students scoring below basic. In the MPI calculation, that's worth 1 point. Basic worth a 3, proficient worth a 4, and advanced worth a 5. And that then puts it into kind of a total number. The department sets status targets for us to achieve in order to earn points. Continuous MPI takes that same idea, but instead of a 1, 3, 4, 5, it's actually going to break those digits, the 1, the 3, the 4, and the 5, and the 1, the 3, and the 4, not the 5, into further units of almost deciles. Next slide, please. So here's a way to think about that. Every test has a scale. It has a floor and it has a ceiling. It has the absolute lowest score you could get on a test and the absolute highest score. So this is an example out of English Language Arts, 3rd grade. If we use that row, we can see the lowest scale score on ELA 3rd grade is 160 scale score. The highest is a 560. These ranges of scores then are the ranges of the scale, and wherever the student scores on the test is the achievement level they fall in. But what you notice there is that the range in each achievement level is not equivalent. It's not like every 20 points of the scale or 100 points is the movement to the next achievement level. They're different. Next slide, please. This table reflects that. So we actually have a range, an amount of 171 scale score points in the below basic range at third grade ELA. What the continuous MPI is going to do is going to break each of these ranges of points into groups, into 10 groups, 10 equivalent groups, and give us essentially a 1/10 of a point on the MPI, meaning what? So before a student scores below basic for the MPI, the value that comes into the calculation is a 1. Now, for every 17 units increased in below basic at third grade, it will move up a 1/10 of a point. So that incentivizes movement within the achievement levels. Student takes the assessment at third grade, is low in the below basic range, worth a 1. Student takes the assessment in fourth grade at the high end of the below basic range. In MSIP 5, still worth a 1. Now it could be a 1.9. So it actually incentivizes all those movements up, as well as the system still incentivizes to move from below basic to basic, proficient to advanced. And you can see here that because these units are not, they don't all sit at 170 or 150 points, when we get into basic and proficient, we start to move the deciles pretty quick. Every 3 or 4 scale score points, moving up another decile. So it's a positive change that has been well received from the field because I feel like it honors credit, it incentivizes moving all students, regardless of where they're at in the spectrum, along these continuums. Next slide, please. So I kind of gave it away with what those weights are going to be, but essentially they run a range from 1 to 1.9, 3 to 3.9, and 4 to 4.9. Advanced will stay a flat 5. Next slide, please. The other thing that matters for that with MSIP 5, or MSIP 6, I'm sorry, as far as us getting our points, is that the State Department will establish targets for us. And what these targets are, it says, okay, what is the range of these MPI values that districts will receive X number of points on? Because of the shift to continuous MPI, and because we don't have previous years to run it on, to set the targets, the department will not be able to run those until they get the results back this summer, after all assessment is done. Interestingly enough, in Missouri, school districts actually get their data a little sooner than the department because we can access it directly with the test provider that we have, whereas the department has to wait for it to be done across everyone before they get it. Therefore, it will not be until July or August that they can begin to even run those numbers to understand where to set the status targets at. So I'll talk about process here in a minute, like, well, what's coming and what's still to do. The department is going to have to revisit this in August to finalize the scoring guide because until it's known, it's not official. Next slide, please. Another positive area that's coming in with MSIP 6 is the area they're calling success-ready students. Previously in MSIP 5, we had an area called college career readiness that had about 3 different parts to it. Success-ready students is taking some of those parts, but then it's bringing in other aspects as well to get an idea and to have data and to get an assessment as to where students are at from kind of a K-12 perspective. So next slide, please. When we look at that, then kind of what happens here is that we earn points through both status and progress, meaning what? Status, certain number of points based on if you're hitting certain targets. Progress are points if we are improving towards or in our status. So we can earn points in both ways, which is a positive thing. So you can see examples there, like this standard on the success-ready students' performances were 10 points. Well, we start doing the math out here. There's actually a lot more than 10 points available. It's designed where we have multiple ways to be able to earn those points, which is a positive thing. It gives us a couple different options as far as what an LEA may want to focus on in their own work. Next slide, please. There's also a success-ready students portion under the continuous improvement side. These reflect measures that the department does not have, but that they feel locally we can assess and report back to them on. So we will have also some additional success-ready student measures sitting on the continuous improvement side. And you can see those are going to work as kind of a met, not met type of framework. So kind of a yes, no. Next slide, please. Then the continuous school improvement plan. This is probably where the largest amount of the points on the continuous improvement sit in. So we know that school districts, charter schools, LEAs have CSIPs, strategic plans, documents that guide the work that we're trying to do locally. The continuous improvement side is looking to assess that on certain dimensions. And so they have developed a set of rubrics. They will be working with districts specifically on their plans for reviewing that, as well as some other documentation for us to write to it. If you've been through MSIP in kind of many years back, there used to be this process of what we'd call crates and creating binders and filling up libraries with all of our documentation. They say we are not going back to that. They say we are not going back to that. Well, one advantage is we're more digital now, so that's a good thing, but also that it should not be that volume of all the documentation. It'll be key things that we're working towards in kind of that CSIP area. You can see there that as far as I think there's 5 different parts that they will be assessing as it relates to improvement planning. And you'll notice that the effective implementation and the exemplary are both worth 3. So 3 will be kind of the max in each of the categories. But the exciting thing that they are bringing in is that if a district charter gets exemplary implementation across the board, they will recognize districts for that work, which is a nice thing to get credit and some recognition for doing really great things. Next slide, please. So then the scoring. This is probably the biggest change that we've been talking about and having to think through is how the system works. And it can get overly technical. I'm going to try to not make it overly technical, but to kind of give you a sense of what those changes might look like. So I mentioned a minute ago, one big change is that all of our points total to 100. So we're working off of a 100-point scale. And in your slides, each of these rows not shaded that are showing here in white are kind of what the source of those points are. Oops, we got a little close. That actually are feeding into that 100. Next slide, please. So the one that has our attention and the one that really is the most different from MSIP 5 to MSIP 6 is coming in the student achievement side of the all students standards and the student group standards. So give you kind of a sense of that. So if we look up there, we have 2 points that we can earn, or two ways in which points are earned that we are judged on in MSIP 6. One is called status, and one is growth. The status will be the continuous MPI that we just described. That's the status measure. There will be targets against it. They'll be set once the assessment comes out, and certain point ranges in there. The other is growth, and so that is a growth measure that the state runs, looking at student performance from spring assessment in one year to spring assessment in the next year. So it is individual student level growth, and they aggregate all that up, and there will be points available there. So the thing to think about here is that, and the values are different for ELA and math. You can see that the maximum target points for highest status of ELA or math is 5, versus on track at 3, versus 2, versus 0. And that floor of 0 has been consistent with MSIP 5 as well. And so these points, then you can see kind of how they change in there, and then also kind of what happens with growth. So next slide, please. So the question really becomes then, how does this scoring of the standards work in 6 versus 5? Because we've actually been on 5 probably since formally 2013, I guess. Most MSIP cycles only run 5 or 6 years, but we've been on this one for, 8 or 9 now, I guess. So we've learned 5 really well. So how does it compare to 5, and how is that going to affect point accumulation? Next slide, please. Next one. Okay, so the easiest way to think about this as far as an analogy are buckets. In MSIP 5, our points all went into one bucket, and the way we got them in there is we got them through a combination of status and progress, which was improvement of our status, or status and growth. All go into one bucket. There's a certain maximum. Those are the points earned. MSIP 6 will have a bucket for the status points and a bucket for the growth points, not combined, okay? And that's really the difference that will come through on our point accrual. Next one. So if we use an example of that, this lays out an MSIP 5 comparison versus an MSIP 6. And the thing to point out here is that, you know, when we were getting our points, it would be through that combination of status and progress or status and growth. So there's a maximum, say, in English language arts of 16. If we earned 12 points in status and 12 points of, or 6 points of progress, that's 18, maximum 16, we're at our number, right? The MSIP 6 version of that won't work quite the same. Those values are there. I'm going to give you that example next. Go ahead. Next slide, please. So, before we earned them through combination, now they sit and are earned independently. Next slide, please. So then how does that affect our point accrual? Next slide. So, in that scenario just given, if we were on track across the board, 12 points for status, and we could either use progress or growth. We couldn't use them both. But either way, we'd have been 16 out of 16, okay? Same thing in student groups, maximum 4 points. We could have earned 3 points here plus 2 points there. We're at 4 out of 4, 100% of the points. MSIP 6, 3 points out of 5. We're down 2. Student groups, 3 points out of 4. We're down 1. And so that's one subject area right there. And there's only 100 points. So, like if we were on track across the board here, in ELA and math, we're already down 4 points. If we were on track in ELA and math in the student groups, we've lost another 2 points. We're already down 6. And nothing has changed from where our performance was, but the way in which that score is going to be calculated. So that's a difference. And this is really how it kind of translates. I'm not going to go through row by row, just provided here for your reference if you're interested. Next, I think if you click one more, something should come up. There you go. So really kind of the thing to compare then is what % of points are earned based on what the status and growth levels are that an LEA would be in. Well, I can point out that there are 2 spots that will not be changed. Floor, lowest level of status, lowest level of growth was worth earning 0% of points before. It will still earn 0% of points in 6. And then the highest, target exceeding. Highest level of status, highest level of growth, 100% of points before, 100% of points now. The difference is everywhere in between. Next slide, please. So a way to think about that then is if we take the MSIP 5% of points, and this is in an example in our learning ones for all students. So MSIP 5 on the x-axis, MSIP 6 on the y. And if we come over here on the right-hand side, you can see if it was equivalent right where it would be, we'd basically be sitting somewhere real near this line. So we can use a few examples then. I was using that on track example. If a district was scoring on track, and all students ELA in MSIP 5, they were earning 100% of points in that standard. Now it's 55%. And there are fewer points. So you can see kind of this whole area over here, there are fewer points available as it's currently proposed. Next slide, please. So then what's that all mean as far as how could it affect our scoring? Well, because we no longer have the multiple channels to earn the points, most LEAs can expect to earn fewer points. The exception, as I mentioned, would be floor or target exceeding. And as a reminder also, because there are fewer points available, 100 versus 140, the impact of each point is worth more. So before 1 point was worth 0.7%, now 1 equals 1. So not that we could ever really afford to lose a point, but it does have more impact now in a 100-point system. Next slide, please. So to the next steps, the department puts out all these rules. It's about MRH staff may have a better sense of the number, but I'd ballpark 150 to 175 page document of the comprehensive guide. I mean, it gives all the details on how to do this. So I'm just trying to give it to you in 20 minutes, the thumbnail sketch of it here. But when they put that out, it's draft. And so, because there's so much there that they need to receive feedback on. So there was a comment period that Many people around the state provided comment and feedback to the department on it. They did take through that feedback and work with it through advisory committees, through their own staff. I do serve on one of the MSIP advisory committees, and I can tell you that, this scoring thing, for example, is one piece that we've been talking about. They received a lot of comments on it because it is different. And I don't know where it lands. That's still to be determined based on kind of the feedback and where they go. But we will know essentially by the start of May, because the first part to finalizing this happens through public hearings that the state does have to hold. So there will be one May 5th in Jeff City. And then at that point, they can have the hearing and the state board can approve it. And that would help us to know, okay, this is how MSIP 6 will work. However, it still will not be totally finalized until August because of having to go back and set those status targets. So then the other work that will happen in between there, July, we'll start to get our map data back. They'll start to work on figuring out those performance targets, another hearing, start working on and finalizing that report development. Selecting districts for continuous improvement in 22, 23. So this will be something for everyone, because to take all the districts through the continuous improvement, we have over almost 550 LEAs in Missouri. That's too many for the department to do. So they're going to try to do it over a 3-year span. So we may get asked, you may get asked. It just depends on the status as to where they're at. But we will all be in different spots, or at least 3 different spots, in that continuous improvement cycle. But we should know heading into the year kind of where that will sit. October, that's just normal assurance stuff we have to do. Same for November. The one to point out though for you is December, because that was always the question. When are we going to see this? So APR, this preliminary APR, the plan is for it to come out in December, which is, historically, that's about when it comes. Usually right after Thanksgiving, first state board meeting, somewhere in there, which is sometimes hard for people to reconcile because we get math and we think about test scores in August, right? And then like, well, no, wait 3 or 4 months, because this piece is really important too. That structure really does still sit here. So that was a lot I put at you. I'd be glad to take any questions, give any clarification, and see what thoughts you may have.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for, again, boiling this down. I appreciate that, you and your colleagues around the state are making the best out of a challenging situation with this. So, yeah, just appreciate, the work you've done both at the advisory level and locally to, help make this make sense. And I think, the big takeaway for me from this is our performance could be exactly the same or actually even a little bit better and still not be, reflect a lower score from, this kind of arbitrary point system that has been devised. So I do think, obviously the public release in December is often something that community members really look to, but this context is helpful as we think about just, making sure folks are not only taking into account this one, very public conversation about the district. I do appreciate that there are new aspects that DESE cares about, but again, we're going to do what's right by kids regardless of how these points shake out.
Right. And I guess I will say to the positive to that end, I feel like, our CSIPs and our local continuous improvement thing is where we try to do that stuff right. I can say, these are the things that we've identified that matter to us that we're wanting to work on. So for the benefit to this, it is nice that it comes in, and, that there can be a way for that to be recognized and known too. I mean, I could envision where there would be some type of repository or some type of way we could see, like, the supporting documents that districts submit through that process. That's actually, that sounds simple, but that's kind of foreign for us. We don't really have a good way to see, let's say you have someone working on some aspect of literacy that you were thinking about and wanted to know their plan. The way you do it now is board member contacts board member, superintendent contacts principal to principal, and like, hey, I hear you're doing this, you know? This could make that more public, which could be a positive thing, I think.
So it sounds like you're saying that the districts, which are equipped to try to find out where their students are and where they're struggling and how to better them and improve and work with other districts who are doing the same thing and collaborate, is a great way to approach this instead of maybe the way that the state's approaching it now?
It's possible, yeah.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah,
Appreciate
very
that.
helpful.
Have a good night.
Okay, COVID mitigation measures?
Thank you. So I will start off by saying that the report will look very different. And so the St. Louis County Department of Health have made major adjustments to the data that's actually pulled. So one change you will find again is that the transmission rate is not being reported. The frequency of reporting will be changing. So we typically were getting a live daily update with the speedometer. That no longer is available, and they no longer are looking at positivity rates, but community rates. It is limiting in our approach as we look at both the local and regional context, and we are continuing to have conversations to best drive how we make decisions for our district. And the data continues to improve. So just last week, the positivity rate regionally for St. Louis County was 4.6%. And as of April 1st, when this data was pulled, it's 3.7%. Now, this is the new reporting. So if you go to the St. Louis County Department of Health page, it shows by community levels, and we currently are in the low community level. But if you look on the right, it also reflects the varying counties and their community levels. But this is how the data will be reported. It also reports the frequency of hospitalizations as well as the change over week, but the frequency will be very different. We are still able to access the positivity rates by 100,000 persons by zip code, and again, you still see that the cases in the past 14 days continue to decline. And 63117 actually has a higher case rate than before in the past. What I am most excited about is our district data, and we actually were carrying a positivity rate of 0 until April 4th when this data was actually pulled, but we continue to see no transmission, very few positivity rates within our school. And then here are our vaccination rates. And so as we continue to have conversations in our COVID task force meetings, they continue to talk about multiple mitigation measures. We continue to have high vaccination rate among staff, in addition to our high school, middle school, and continuing to see growth in our elementary school. We recognize that our ECC numbers are low because a large number of our students cannot be vaccinated. So I have here our current mitigation measures, and I want to be very clear, we do recognize that the pandemic is not over, but we also have indicated that we will continue to watch the science. In our March meeting, we said that we would wait 2 weeks after spring break to see if we saw a surge as we did around winter break. We have not. And so the data has continued to support the mitigation measures that we had, and at the last board meeting, this is where we ended. For the recommendations for amendments, which will be coming forward for the board. And so the first is to suspend the vaccination booster and/or weekly testing requirement. So what I had Ms. Meacham to do is to pull the employee testing statistics to give the board an idea of where we are. So testing has occurred over 23 consecutive weeks. Of the 28 employees who were unvaccinated at the time of testing, 6 have transitioned from the district, and the average number of tests per week were 19. And so within those week of testing, what we found is that really the testing wasn't an effective measure of identifying additional positive cases. It was the self-reporting for those staff members, and as of late, from the tests that have been ran, we have not had any positive cases to surface from the testing. Other pieces, to suspend the mask mandate requirement and to transition mask, to mask recommended, and being very clear that that is for our kindergarten through 12th grade students. And I had a lot of conversation with our COVID task force and also the St. Louis County Department of Health. And they recommended that because our early childhood students cannot be vaccinated, that those students in our preschool classrooms remain masked. So the recommendation is kindergarten through 12th grade. And then we have established a 1% building positivity rate threshold to determine remasking. So with that, we've actually combined the middle and high school because those are shared spaces, and each of those buildings will be monitored now separately for positivity rate, and we will be making adjustments to our reporting on the website. Those are the recommendations that will be coming forward. What questions might you have?
I'm curious, is there a compelling reason for us to target April 8th as the date versus Monday, for instance, to give more time for family notification?
No, I don't think, as far as the date, and that's a great question, just figured end of the board meeting, it could be tomorrow, it could be Monday. I don't think it would make a difference as far as notifying families.
I think with the removal of masks, I would assume that if there is a positive case in a classroom, that there would be some slightly different procedures around possible quarantines or kids identified as close contacts. I think this is a great opportunity to, again, say, if your child is vaccinated and asymptomatic, you know, they would not be required to quarantine. And so, you know, I do think that's an important piece for folks to recognize, that if masks are removed and your child is exposed, they are more likely to be quarantined than they have been before. So again, I know there's been a high value on keeping kids in classrooms, and just, you know, that will potentially have an impact from this. I wanted to just confirm that that's correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
And in our COA meeting, Vince Estrada is still working to offer another vaccination clinic because we still have preschool students who are actually becoming eligible to be vaccinated, if that so is an option for our families. I will also say that we are one of few districts that continue to contact trace. We continue to notify families of exposure and continue to be commended through the St. Louis County Department of Health for our efforts.
The other thing that I just want to check on is, you know, I do think that we will need to rely more on community members to get tested themselves if they have a suspicion of COVID, right? That we want to catch these things before they get into the classrooms. So is there any sense that the NAMI, you know, partnership is, you know, how is that going? Is it going to continue? You know, they're not planning to drop us anytime soon.
No,
Okay.
and it's actually been a very good partnership. They were at the elementary school today, and that was part of the conversation that we've had. So they continue to show up. They have continued to be good partners and continue to support us through the end of the school year, and if so needed, during summer school and even on the onset of the beginning of the year. So no, at this time, no indicators that we would lose that partnership, and it continues to be accessible to our community.
Great. I know, you know, obviously some members of the community have easier access to at-home testing right now, and I hope, you know, folks are continuing to use those when necessary and you know, as they're able to afford them. But yeah, this continues to be a free resource that I, again, hope community members will use seriously.
And I will say, by being in buildings, particularly when we initially transitioned from mask optional for outdoors, we have not seen any increases in positivity rates, and the students have been really responsible as far as transitioning back in, and the teachers have been as well. And we continue to ensure that our community is safe.
I have a question. If a particular building does go over the 1% positivity rate, and you begin recommending masks for that particular building, how are the families going to be notified?
Through our current outlets, so we are able to use text messaging, and usually Ed Rich will do that. So he's able to identify a building, send that information out. The building principal uses Constant Contact, and then we also have phone blasts where we can send messages and information that way. We've been pretty consistent with communication to families regarding cases and the need to mask. So if a building were to go above that 1% positivity rate, and we were very intentional about picking the 1% because that's the percentage that we've been looking at across the year. And so if you look at some of the surrounding districts, it varies from 2% to 4% to 7%. But we wanted to be consistent with the metrics that we've been using. But if a building is over the 1% positivity rate, they will immediately mask, and we would continue to monitor the data each week, and they would continue to mask until it becomes below the threshold that's been established.
And I know as a district, we haven't been reporting at the building level, but really the only time we've been over 1% was during the Omicron surge right after winter break, right? So as an entire district, I know we've obviously had some more challenges in particular buildings than others.
And Vince is actually, along with the nurses, they, at the backside, have actually been tracking individual building data for positivity rate. And again, we have been tracking quite well, and we saw the major surge at the return of winter break.
I don't really have any questions. I guess it's more of a comment that backs up Randy's question, which is communication's key in this, especially if we do need to pivot, and we have to pivot in a very quick, timely manner. And the communication is, will be more surgical than ever before, based upon it could just be one, building at the time, that cannot be more important now, if we were to transition up to that 1%, because we want to eliminate confusion for our families.
And one of the things that we can work on, and I made a note, is to work with the COA team to identify what that process will look like so that families can be informed of that, and they don't have to guess how we will communicate and the frequency of such.
And along those lines, I think it's critical for us to continue to maintain a supply of masks if a family doesn't receive the communication or doesn't see the communication, so that we're able to supplement where needed if there's a quick pivot.
Well, thank you to the board for approving previous purchases. We have plenty of masks, so I'm excited about that.
I do have a logistical question. When there are students who choose to remain masked and are more comfortable being within the classroom around other students who are also masked, is there an approach that students and families can take to allow some clustering within the rooms?
Great question. So that conversation would be had with building principals to work closely with classroom teachers, because we do recognize that students will continue to come masked and parents will be making those requests. And so doing it in a gentle manner so that we are not putting students in a position where they don't feel comfortable, and the sense of belonging that we create in our schools is diminished. But the principals will work closely with the classroom teachers and also with the families if those requests are made.
Thank you.
That may also be something that would be nice to be proactively asked by the principals, as opposed to putting the onus on kids or families to have to say, we'd really actually be more comfortable with, being at a pod with other masked students.
We can do that as well.
Great.
With that being said, since we've got April 8th on here, does that still stand as your recommendation, or would you prefer to be later?
We can make the adjustment for the recommendation for Monday.
I think that would be beneficial in giving families an opportunity to consider or contemplate what approach they wish to take,
Yes.
and potentially
And the
also do
weekend to talk to their
some
children.
outreach to the teacher.
Right. Yeah.
Or reach out to administrators. Thank you. Okay, furniture order phase 2. Randy Charles?
First of all, thanks for agreeing to consider this action item at your workshop. The furniture orders, it's like anything else, supply chain issues. We want to get these orders in as quickly as possible, so we have it in place for the start of school next year. As you know, the board approved a first round of furniture purchases a few months ago. This second phase is for all the furniture related to the media center and to the cafeteria. A couple of other minor spaces, but those are by far the biggest portions of that. Want to make sure you understand that both principals and the librarian were involved in selection of those furnishings. Everything from the functionality, design, color, everything, very involved. The cost of this order would be $224,010.78. That is consistent with the budget that Mr. Holzer has set aside for this second phase of furniture purchase. And it will be delivered hopefully in August is our plan. We hope that the media center and the cafeteria spaces are turned over to us by the contractor right around August 1st. We're still pushing them. And then the furniture would follow closely behind that. Those are the basics. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just really appreciate how thorough this is with the pictures and giving us a visual.
Yeah, the company's color art, and I've been very impressed with them. When we go to their showroom, they can actually set us in chairs, put our hands on stuff, and then they can pull all this up on the computer. And what you're seeing, if we wanted them to move this desk over here, add this chair there, a couple of clicks, and boom, a new 3D picture comes up. So, yeah, their color art's done a really nice job for us.
Thank you for keeping us updated.
Yes,
Thank you, Randy.
No supply chain issues.
Right. Right.
Distinguished awards, Ed?
Looking distinguished himself here.
Right.
So as you know, each spring we hold an event celebrating ourselves. We honor those who have achieved certain milestones, such as years of service, those who have made the decision to call it a career, and those who have been selected as Teachers of the Year. But just as importantly, the Board of Education salutes individuals, both inside and outside our buildings, for their selfless devotion to MRH. These are people who give their time and their talent and their hearts for the mission. And these are the distinguished awards. Each individual and family nominated this year richly deserves to be recognized, but we have asked the board to select the top of the crop in the following categories. Advocate of the Year. We asked our employees to nominate an MRH employee who consistently demonstrates extraordinary devotion to the MRH mission of inspiring and preparing students as leaders, scholars, stewards, and citizens. Citizen of the Year. Nominate any individual who has been active at MRH and has helped to build a better community for students, staff, community members, homeowners, elders, etc. This person can be an active volunteer for MRH and often is. Family of the Year. Nominate any family within the district who is deeply involved and supportive of MRH events and school community functions. Spirit of MRH. This staff member embodies what MRH stands for, is always active, positive, upbeat in spirit when it comes to anything MRH. This person is often found supporting MRH in a variety of ways all throughout the year. And new this year, Support Staff Member of the Year. We asked our employees to nominate a non-certified MRH employee who goes above and beyond in providing support services to students and staff. And I know that you've reviewed the nominations, and we look forward to your selections during the action items portion of the agenda. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, MRH Board of Education oral interview of candidates. So we had 2 candidates apply. We had Tiffany, and is it Tasmin or Tasman? Tasman Ewing, and Julie Bushnell. However, I don't believe that Julie is here. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we will be interviewing Tiffany. Come on up.
We did reach out to Ms. Bushnell. We just haven't heard from her. Is that beyond her application?
Yes, my understanding is that we've reached out to her via email and phone on several occasions. I myself have also reached out to no avail.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, hi. This is always a little clunky and awkward.
It definitely is, but thank you for coming so much. So I thought we could start with, if there's anything you'd like to say to us first, would the board be okay with that?
Sure, like an opening statement.
Yes.
Well, thanks for having me, and appreciated listening to and watching a little closer your deliberations. That was helpful. I've been watching through a computer for a long time, so it's good to see you all in person. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all of your service as administrators, as board members. I feel kind of like I know you, even though it's been through the computer. And also, all the board members who served and are no longer with us. I've just been really inspired by your example and your service, and I know that I've sent notes to some of you that maybe feel a little annoying to deal with, but I do appreciate the difficult position that you've all been in, and I feel like anybody can kind of offer advice from the sidelines, but ultimately stepping up, taking responsibility for helping you think through, question these decisions, but also taking accountability ultimately for the decision that's made was something that I felt like it would be worth doing for the community. So that's why I'm here, and I've been a resident in Maplewood, Richmond Heights area since 2007. I have 2 students in my direct family, and a sister and brother-in-law and nephew in the district as well. And just really lovely district, lovely people, and that's it.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
You provided really thorough written responses, so I mean, I think pretty
All the
much
time.
everything that we would historically have asked, you've covered, which again, appreciate the thoroughness and the time and attention that obviously took put together. That bodes well for the time and attention that is necessary to serve in this capacity as well.
Yes.
And along those lines, I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for the advocacy that you have given to the district to date in your role as a parent. We've all benefited on this board from the outreach that you've done. So I want to recognize that you've been active in that space in a way that's been very supportive of our work. So I guess I will ask a question related to that. If you want to talk just a little bit about what particular skills you feel that you possess that will add strength and capacity to this board.
Sure. Well, I really appreciated the discussion of MSIP. That's a new specific area for me. But my background is really, so I was an actuary. I am an actuary. I was an actuary for about 8 years working, advising pension plans. So that was, in that capacity, I developed consultative skills, got exposed to a range of different organizations, and learned how to ask questions and advise people in that way. And then I transitioned to being a Medicaid actuary for Centene. And in that capacity, I've worked in a sort of similar collaborative way with Medicaid agencies in a number of states. Of course, the through line in all of that is analysis of data and trying to pull stories out of the data to really understand what's going on, and especially in Medicaid. I think understanding what
the ways in which we can serve our members as a Medicaid managed care organization, understand where the healthcare system might be failing them, and try to identify ways to fix those things that are maybe not working well. I think there's a connection there between how do we manage and monitor ourselves and make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to the people that very much depend upon what we do. So I think that's kind of the through line there, and I think especially I'm very excited about the new focus within M6 on equity and how we measure that. I think that's kind of new, a new thing that a lot of people are trying to figure out. So don't pretend that I come with a lot of answers, but I expect to come with a lot of questions. Hopefully good ones.
Excellent. Our board is great at asking questions.
Yes.
And I definitely appreciate what you said about the data telling a story and figuring out what that story is. As you know, we're a data-driven district, and we really do try to look at the data and analyze what story it's telling, and we're still learning and developing in that area. So that's awesome.
So I just want to talk maybe a little bit about board dynamic, and you were very thorough in your application and informed us and educated us in a way that makes this really easy. But can you just talk about some of your experience, maybe with I know that you've got some work with some subgroups and things like that, but other committees and other boards that you've been active with?
Sure. That's a hard one. I understand that that you have a lot of experience, especially in this board, understanding how procedures work and things like that. I will be honest that this is new territory for me, and I expect to learn a lot from you all if you nominate me. So formal organization, governing structures like this, no direct experience. The closest thing would have to be serving as a leader of people. And really kind of advising some of those organizational structures within my company. So no, nothing quite as formal procedural as this. It's more sort of general advisory sort of capacity.
And then I just want to throw it out there that I think we learn something new every meeting. So it's not like we're experts here, and we mess this up too, so it's okay. It's just to get an idea if you've had experience within the dynamic of working in the board. And I think my last point is, this board is a fast-moving train. We don't often have the opportunity or pleasure of slowing down. This is just more of a comment, is that there needs to be a real commitment to training fast, learning fast, and then really the commitment every week to whatever comes across our emails, which sometimes there's a lot and sometimes there's very little, and most of the time there's just a lot. Just that it could be 10 hours one week and 1 hour the next, but it is fast work, but it is hard work, but it's probably the most rewarding work that you'll be part of.
I appreciate that.
And you have, if we are successful in nominating tonight, you have big shoes to fill.
Oh my gosh. That's true. That's so true. Anybody else have any questions? Just to piggyback a little bit off of what Maria said, in addition to the time that we spend when we're not in this room, there's also the commitment to the work sessions, to the training, to sometimes the retreats, and then the school board meetings.
And the committees.
And the committees, yes. And everybody is valuable, and everybody's important and contributes, and helps each other carry that load. And we have to have so many members here. It is important. And there's that commitment. Do you feel that you would be able to meet that commitment and be present for those things?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any closing statement?
Thank you.
Okay, on to action items.
I'd like to nominate Tiffany. Just lost. Tasman Ewing for the open position of Director on the Maplewood Richmond Heights Board of Education.
Second? Okay.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Welcome. Okay, on to Distinguished Awards Family of the Year.
This is like the epitome of us being clunky.
It is.
Well, are we starting with family?
Yes.
Well, I can already, is this, Brandy, do you want us to make nominations, or is it more of discussion before we make the motion?
Usually we've done it both ways, actually, in the past.
I mean, Robert's rules would say there has to be a
motion.
motion, yeah, but.
Okay, so I would say a motion, and then if anybody wants to have discussion, then we would do that, and then we'd vote. Trying to pull up my list.
Well, I know who we can't.
Yeah, okay,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, okay,
That was
so
my
now we're
point,
down
is
to
that
4.
We can't nominate one family because sitting board members' families can't.
Right, correct.
And I'll also remind my fellow board members, we aren't necessarily bounded by the lists. either.
Right, yes,
Yeah.
we-
Correct.
That's why it makes it difficult for
Yeah.
it to go straight to an action item.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'm willing to put a nomination out on the floor here for Family of the Year. I think often we have done groups, and so I'd like to maybe consider the Chicken Steward families for distinguished awards. Putting that nomination out there.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Sounds great.
It's often hard to elevate, any one family
Right.
over others, and this is obviously a commitment that's, integral to both the curriculum and to, a broader group of families.
And very
Agreed.
time-consuming.
Yeah, and very
Agreed.
time-consuming.
Spoken from a former steward.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I will second that nomination,
Thank you.
and then we need a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Nomination carries?
Yeah.
Okay,
Great. One down.
one down.
Ooh, goodness. Citizen, yeah.
Well, given the nominations,
Yeah.
I think it's clear that we should nominate Julie Francois as our Citizen of the Year.
I would second that.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Nomination carries.
for Advocate of the Year. I would like to nominate Vince Estrada.
I would like to second that.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Nomination carries. Citizen of the Year.
Support.
No,
support
Sorry,
staff.
we did that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Mine's not the right order. Okay.
yeah.
Here.
Hold on. Go back to the thing. Okay, support staff member of the year.
All of them.
Mhm.
Agreed.
Sorry.
It's kind of hard to pick one.
I mean, I know it kind of showed up in that in a different category as well, but, I would love to call out the Discover Club team as a whole. And all those folks who have stepped up and supported, staff throughout the year. I know that's, again, not one.
Okay, so
No, we're not.
is the nomination for the Discover Club?
Yeah, it was, in a different category, there was actually.
I think it was
Discover Club Extra Coverage, all staff members that have supported.
Okay.
Hi, Ed. That's, there are too many to
To name
acknowledge here.
individually,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Okay, so do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
We can have a discussion if there's anybody else who wants to pull anything out.
Is there anyone that wanted a discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nomination carries. I do not know how we do this one.
Spirit, yeah.
Okay, there's another person on here that's actually won it before besides the first one. I think Betty's gotten it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
Chris Ricks may have gotten it.
Yeah, I just had that
Before.
list up.
Do you have
Yeah,
that?
I don't really recognition.
I don't know how Kathy Lubert hasn't gotten it before.
Oh my gosh.
How do we do yours?
Did you do the nurses specifically?
What do we call them? What do we call
All of
our
the
support staff that really stepped up during? We just did a special. We got a name.
For all. And we put the signs on the fence.
No, so on here's the nurses.
I know, I gave you that.
Custodian.
Yeah, right.
I spoke to
Yeah.
custodians and nurses. Food service workers. I know we did that though previously. Good groups on it.
You haven't made a nomination.
This is so hard.
Yeah, this one is really hard. Yeah, that's where my gut was going first.
Okay, I
Number three.
am going to
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
nominate Ernest Jones. Would you guys like to have some discussion?
We had discussion around our nurses as well.
Sure, you said around who?
The nurses.
The nursing staff.
Yes, so what, my thought process was all of them, do the custodians, the nurses, but I know that we did do that this year where we honored our nurses and our food, service workers and our, those people that really stepped up during COVID. But I would be, I mean, I would be fine with doing our nurses and maybe our bus drivers. both of whom
Have
really
worked.
stepped up and put in
Well,
so
we
many
have
hours.
multiple bus drivers nominated here,
Yes.
That's true.
custodians.
So that
so,
actually-
of
But-
B&G, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we obviously honor all of our support staff.
Yeah, she's still here. Actually, I saw her today.
These are all wonderful nominations.
Yeah, they
I'm sure
are.
to the community, we look like the most indecisive group of people because we love them all and we don't
But-
want to pick a favorite
Yes, how do
child.
you choose? They're all so
I will tell
wonderful.
you, when I looked at the list, immediately, the first person I was going to select was Ed, but he has declined the
Yes.
nomination. So I just want to go on record as saying my choice won't let me nominate him.
I agree with that statement.
And I just want to acknowledge that I believe Ed has stepped up and continues to step up, and especially during COVID, has been the constant presence of our
Yes.
school district
Yes.
for our families. So
Yeah.
I just feel like I need to acknowledge that, since you won't let me acknowledge it in any other way.
Well, I mean, Ed is not the president, and just saying. Executive privilege here, you know?
Yeah. Is that a problem right there? Okay, many, yeah. Yeah, I mean, my one thing, and again, this is a night when we honor everybody, right,
Yes.
in groups. I do think spirit of MRH is like, at least in the last like 15 years, been like a single person, which I know again is hard, so I would push us to say for this one to try and zero in on a person, you know.
Okay.
But again, the recognition that there are many past winners on this list, there are many past winners throughout the district, and, yeah. So,
You really won't let us pick you?
he's like not even making eye contact.
He asked very respectfully.
You did. You said respectfully, otherwise I would just ignore that.
There's an open nomination on the table from Brandy. I mean, I love the idea of a custodian and bus driver being our, you know, our spirit this year. I mean, I think it absolutely is, sums it up.
The glue
And-
that's held us
Yeah,
together.
yeah. So I'm happy to second that if it's not already seconded.
Okay, any more discussion, or are we ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Nomination carries.
What's it say when it's harder for us?
I would
Say
say
our people
she-
that make $100,000.
You know, that is the most rewarding and difficult part of what we.
Yes.
Well, and thank you to all the nominators for making it so hard too.
Right,
Yes,
that's true.
I got it.
Elevating the good things that, I hope those folks at least get little notes about the love that other people shared for them in the district.
We
Yes.
could send them shout-out notes. Ed actually ordered our pens, and we have cards that we write shout-out notes to staff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, furniture order phase 2, we need to vote on that.
Move to approve the furniture order phase 2 as presented.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. COVID-19 mitigation measures with the, do we need to make a motion to amend it, I guess? To April,
Oh, sure.
11th.
Okay.
Was that 11?
11th.
Sure, I'll do it. I move to recommend amending the MRH universal mitigation measures to reflect the following. Suspend the mask mandate requirement and transition to mask recommended beginning April 11th for all staff and students over the age of 5. Suspend vaccination booster and/or weekly testing requirement, and establish a 1% building positivity rate threshold to determine remasking.
Second?
thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Okay, motion to go into executive session?
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 1, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on March 3rd, on April 7th, 2022, for the following specific reasons: personnel matters and legal matters.
Can I get a second, sorry.
Second.
Can I get a roll call?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, 5-minute break?
Yeah.
All right.
So I have to